Quote, not all research findings are going to be popular, and not all scientific ideas are going to be loved by all. But publishing ideas and findings that might cut against the grain at the end of the day helps us better understand the nature of the world. And that, as I see it, is kind of the point of science. Right? Right? That is the point of science. The pursuit of the truth, whether you like it or not. Well. Merry Christmas to those of you who celebrated, and Happy New Year. I hope you all had a wonderful end to your 2023. As promised, I'm back after my vacation for the holidays, and figured I'd start off with something to follow up with what we finished up with at the end of last year. A few of you might remember that at the end of last year, Gina and I published one last Rogue Journal Club right before Christmas that had to do with scientific censorship, and specifically an article in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which you can see somewhat in the thumbnail here, on pro-social motives underlying scientific censorship by scientists, a perspective and research agenda. And had a lot of good commentary. I noticed a lot of folks enjoyed the audio version. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching, of course. And if you haven't checked it out yet, go check this out, because I will link it in the description for you. But shortly before Christmas, this was it actually came across my radar. New online collection documents censorship in science. Now, if you're thinking it's specifically a compendium of all the very many times that science has been censored, it's not necessarily that as much as a larger collection on the whole issue itself, commentary and thoughts and what have you. And so it makes for a nice compendium in here. And things that, as Jerry Coyne says here in this commentary, it's an extremely useful compilation of discussions about how scientific truths are prevented from coming to light, usually because they're politically unpalatable or present data and conclusions that make people uncomfortable in a progressive climate. So, Jerry Coyne from Evolution is True, writing on that one. Why Evolution is True, writing on that one. So I figured a brief discussion of this. You can find this, and of course it will be linked in the video description for you, but you can find this on the Heterodox STEM substack here also. And I think it is quite worth a good looking at here, as written by Anna Krylov and Jay Tansman. Anna, of course, has appeared on this channel. Of course, one of my favorite people when it comes to this particular issue and discussion. So, Spotlight on Scientific Censorship, a Virtual Collection. We have prepared a compilation of recent articles documenting present-day censorship in science and explaining the mechanism by which censorship in science operates. Censorship, the suppression of facts and ideas, is as old as history itself. Censorship has been invoked to protect people's minds from corruption by bad ideas, to shield religious truths from heresy, to protect the feelings of the faithful from blasphemy, and to ensure the safety of the state in time of war. Suppression of facts and ideas is antithetical to the production of knowledge, yet, from its inception, science has been a target of censorship. Despite the key role science plays in reducing human suffering, providing solutions to pressing problems of humankind, and improving the lives of people worldwide, censorship in science is endemic in even the most advanced democratic societies. Yeah, the key role commentary, I do want to make a point on this, and that the key role there that's played is providing answers. In the pursuit of the truth, we solve a lot of the problems that actually help in reducing human suffering and providing solutions to pressing problems. So that is a point I want to make on that. Recently, science journals and publishers have opened a new and disturbing chapter in the history of scientific censorship. The censorship of scientific articles that are alleged to be harmful to a particular group or population, a practice that violates the guidelines of the Committee on Publication Ethics, COPE. No offense to whomever might be on that committee, but that seems like an unfortunate acronym. I don't know why, it just strikes me as an unfortunate acronym, perhaps. Anyway, the COPE, maybe the PEC might be better, the Publication Ethics Committee. Anyway, the practice began with scientific journals retracting articles in response to the demands of online mobs, but has since been codified into policy by various editorial boards and scientific publishers. Censorship is objectionable on both philosophical and pragmatic grounds. On the philosophical side, the notion that the public must be protected from dangerous or harmful knowledge is at odds with liberal, in the classical liberal sense, enlightenment values, according to which knowledge is power, which the public is capable of using responsibly. On the practical level, by hiding selected facts, censorship distorts our understanding of the world, thereby undermining our ability to solve challenging problems. Put it this way: if you censor something because you dislike what it says, but it happens to be correct, you do then, if you apply it in the context of decision making, make perhaps very bad decisions in what to do about said problem because you've gotten rid of the thing that's true because you dislike it that it's true or it's offensive or harmful. And in this case, what they're talking about with harmful here is the reason it's in air quotes, or in quotes in here anyway, is in part because what they're talking about with the sense of harmful is basically I'm offended or somebody's offended by it. Somebody's offended by it. Not I'm offended per se, but somebody is offended by it. I read it, somebody reads it, therefore they get offended by it, therefore they don't want to see it. And those kinds of things. That's what's meant by harmful. It cannot be disturbing in any particular way. It cannot cause discomfort or anything like that, regardless of whether or not it may be a true observation or a true statement. Censorship also leads to distrust in science. When scientists hide select facts to promote their political agendas, the public rightfully perceives them as politically motivated agents rather than objective and trustworthy experts. I go back to the other thing that I finished 2023 with: introspection. Keep an eye out for introspection. Maybe that would actually help in improving some trust. Despite the long history of scientific censorship and its current prevalence, the mechanisms by which censorship operates, the agents who impose censorship and their motives, and the ultimate costs of censorship have not been systematically investigated. A recent paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by Corey Clark and 38 authors, and as Gina and I mentioned, that is a who's who of authors on that list. Pro-social motives underlie scientific censorship by scientists, a perspective and research agenda, takes a stab at this issue. The paper lays out important questions regarding the nature and consequences of censorship and puts out a call for systematic research on the subject. One of the paper's co-authors, psychology professor Steve Stewart Williams, summarizes the evidence for the current wave of scientific censorship and self-censorship. This is the other thing: self-censorship is also a problem, as well as the rise of censorious attitudes among scientists, which motivated the paper. Increasing numbers of scientists report being sanctioned for conducting politically contentious research. Retractions of papers have become more and more common over the last decade, and at least some of these appear to be primarily driven by concerns other than scientific merit. One group of scholars even retracted their own paper, not because it was scientifically flawed, but because it was being cited by conservatives in ways the authors didn't approve of. Now, a point on that one: when people put out a study, there is a certain amount of debate that goes on. And I actually remember being asked this in grad school, in terms of what is the scientist's responsibility with the study after it's published. And the truth of the matter with it is that you cannot know what people are going to do with it. You have absolutely no way of knowing. You have the known knowns, the known unknowns, and the unknown unknowns. And the unknown unknowns are the real thing in this. You have no idea with certain things are going to happen with it. It could be picked up by people you disagree with. And that's kind of what happened in this case, which was not an appropriate reason for the authors to retract their own article. But anyway, several lines of research suggest that studies reaching politically unpalatable conclusions may have a harder time negotiating the peer review process than they would if the conclusions were in the opposite direction. As the paper notes, quote, when scholars misattribute their rejection of disfavored conclusions To quality concerns that they do not consistently apply, bias and censorship are masquerading as scientific rejection. Recent surveys suggest that many academics support censoring, there we go, controversial research, with support being strongest among younger scholars. Those who are, my generation and younger coming out who don't necessarily have a good understanding of things like Mertonian norms. Unsurprisingly, recent polls also suggest that many academics now self-censor on even mildly controversial topics. A large number of academics express a willingness to discriminate against conservatives when it comes to hiring, publications, grants, and promotions. Unsurprisingly, conservative scholars are particularly likely to self-censor. A growing number of journals have explicitly committed to judging scientific papers not just on the quality of the research, but also on their supposed social or political impact, something that you cannot fully know when you put something out. In effect, note Clark et al., editors are granting themselves vast leeway to censor high-quality research that offends their own moral sensibilities. Not an appropriate reason to retract or censor an article. Just because you're offended by it is not an appropriate reason. The paper reveals an interesting fact. As the table shows, it is often scientists themselves who are the censors. The paper also explains that the motive for modern scientific censorship is often a pro-social one. A better understanding of why people engage in censorship and what downstream costs of censorship are could lead to more effective strategies to combat it. Co-author, distinguished Professor Lee Jussum, points out, university administrators are now well versed in supposed threats to social justice. Far fewer know much about or have deep commitments to academic freedom. Consequently, the immediate and downstream costs of censorship are rarely considered or weighed against the supposed benefits of not causing offense. No wonder we have seen a rising tide of scientific censorship. Lead author Corey Clark expresses hope that the paper, quote, will raise the standards of our science leaders and decision makers who aim to obstruct science based on their personal moral intuitions. At minimum, they should be held to the same standards as the rest of us who strive to create and disseminate science and make their case with data. Motivated by publication of this foundational paper, we have compiled a virtual collection of scientific papers, viewpoints, op-eds, and that document the modern rise of censorship in science. Our list is most likely incomplete, and we encourage readers to add their relevant references in the comments. Now, I know the authors who may watch this can probably go back through some of my videos and find a whole collection in there, so they're welcome to do so, and I will... I can try to provide what bits I have, though I think some of what I've done and some of what's here and in other places has a significant amount of overlap. So leave it at that on that front. But from here, there's actually a tremendous amount of great links and material. Of course, there's not all that time in what I hope to be a short video today to go through all of that. The foundational paper, which of course, we did a Rogue Journal Club episode on that, so if you haven't had the chance to see it and you want a summary of the paper, you can go there. Just shameless plug for ourselves on that one. Op-eds and blogs discussing the findings and limitations. Musa Al-Gharbi's one, I saw that, measuring science. Musa Al-Gharbi's got quite a few in here. In here, with all of these things, the main criticisms of the Clark et al. 2023 refer not to what the paper said, but to what it omitted due to page limit. That's okay. I'm glad they said that, because that was a comment that I know Gina and I both had when we read the article. I forget. All right. Backstory for those of you who might be unfamiliar with journals. Journals do impose a word limit most often. Not a page limit per se, but a word limit. And then also some other journals now also impose a limit to the number of figures or to the number of elements, which is together figures and tables that you can incorporate in a manuscript. And I do believe, because PNAS, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, is fairly high up on the scale of influence of journals, that was pretty much a limitation of the PNAS paper was itself the page limit. I'm sure the authors could have gone on and on and on and on. And if you read like the Defense of Merit paper, which was in the Journal of Controversial Ideas, the supplemental for that article is very, very long. And I don't know if PNAS allows supplemental material off the top of my head. With that, I have to go back and check. But just a note on that front, and I'm glad they acknowledged it here because that is that is a challenge when you're writing these things in a journal article. They do actually have, unless you get special permissions from an editor, you do actually have some pretty strict word limits. Not page limits so much, but word limits specifically. With regard to the above pieces, Kuntz 2023 found it odd that the paper did not mention the main ideological driver of present-day censorship, critical social justice, sometimes called wokeism, which you hear me tend to refer to as postmodernism, which is the foundational stuff in there. Postmodernism, which has a dislike of objectivity. Indeed, much of today's pro-socially motivated censorship springs from the CSJ movement. Alonso quotes an ethicist who claims, quote, there are thousands and thousands of examples of scientific articles published in good scientific journals that lead to real tangible harm. The claim, asserted without emphasis, exemplifies, as noted by Clark et al. 2023, that harm is assumed rather than demonstrated by credible research data. At the same time, the purported benefits of censorship have yet to be illustrated. And this is a key point. Gina and I didn't get into it too much with the Clark et al. Paper, but that is a point that I very much agree with on that. I have yet to see real studies that say publishing this article led to this tangible harm to a group of people. So things like IRBs and what have you exist to make sure that there is very little harm to the participants of a research study when there are human subjects involved. And of course, there's also the animal ethics related things too. So there's things like that, but I have yet to see myself a study where that's actually quantified, that it actually did some kind of harm. And I would think it might be extremely difficult to do that. And at the same time, no, I don't see the benefits of censorship paper either. Prudential judgment. I think what they're getting at here is something that I noted, and I was pleased also in the Clark paper that they did that again. Something else that Gina and I said too, and agreed on, was the notion with the Clark paper that that they distinguished carefully between the censorship and a legitimate rejection, and trying to get the two of them not to be confused. And I do believe that if we're running into an issue where the scientists themselves no longer trust said system, that's going to be a point of contention and complete confusion and all sorts of stuff. So you need to nail that one down real fast. Griffin 2023 highlights the need for credible evidence of harms, quoting Clark and Algarby. Quote, what's new in that journals are now explicitly endorsing moral concerns as legitimate reasons to suppress science, wrote. In their paper, Algarby, Clark, and their co-authors suggested trying to scientifically measure or predict potential dangers that could be caused by the publication of research findings rather than relying on the often arbitrary intuitions and authority of a small and underrepresented editorial boards of journals. Coin 2023 writes, the article lacks tangible examples of how odious this kind of censorship can be. Examples really hit home, especially when you see how hypocritical and sneaky authors and journals can be, even when acting pro-socially. They agree here and present a compilation of papers that enumerate such odious examples. So this is Stevens, Lee Jussum, and Nathan Honeycutt. In here, presents examples of present-day censorship, comparing and contrasting them with historical examples. In there. Again, I don't have all the time in this video to go into absolutely everything that's in here, but it is quite an excellent compendium, as I have read it through a bit already, and I encourage you to go back and look at it, because I'm going to be looking it through myself in things that I am going to be up to in the future. The new Book Burners, Academic Tribalism book chapter in The Tribal Mind, The Psychology of Collectivism, Schrodinger Press, forthcoming, preprint available here. So this is a new one from the introduction of the book. We use the term book burning as Bradbury did, both descriptively and metaphorically, to include burning of actual books, but especially within academia, to calls to retract, remove, and memory hole published papers. In the present chapter, we focus on factors that have undergirded book burning for thousands of years, a sense of righteous victimization, and a desire by the book burners to impose their values and norms on others. The authors explain that cognitive rigidity and censoriousness are manifestations of tribalism, or political sectarianism, and authoritarianism. They also described examples of book burning of peer-reviewed articles, retractions of published papers in response to outrage campaigns, such as Gillies' viewpoint essay in Third World Quarterly, Hoodlicky's retrospective essay in Agavante Chemie, which is a chemistry journal in Germany, Glisky's paper on the new theory of gender dysphoria in neuro, and a block retraction of 5 papers from Perspectives on Psychological Science. I think I know which one that is. I'm guessing that's the Fiedler on the Roof fiasco, but I can't recall exactly, so correct me if I'm wrong. Several studies have investigated the psychology of censorship, what motivates censorious attitudes. So we got a lot of great stuff in here. And some great things in this. I very much suggest, again, going through a lot of this stuff. Gare writes, Gare writing in this one, discovering natural selection was like confessing a murder. Psychology Today. Gare discusses the harms of self-censorship using a historical example, Darwin's hesitancy to publish on the evolution of life because of the anticipated impact of his findings. As he wrote to the botanist Joseph Dalton Hooker, quote, "It is as if one were confessing a murder." Darwin's discomfort was so great that he reported vomiting regularly, thinking about the implications of the theory of evolution on the perceived special place of Homo sapiens among other species. Gare writes, quote, "Darwin's ultimate decision to publish about evolution shaped our understanding of the world profoundly," and argues that holding on to critical findings is doing humanity a disservice. In other words, not being able to actually publish something that might contradict a well-established feature because you're afraid of the backlash and you're self-censoring is a problem for all of us in society and in the general goal of the pursuit of the truth. Quote, "Not all research findings are going to be popular, and not all scientific ideas are going to be loved by all. But publishing ideas and findings that might cut against the grain at the end of the day helps us better understand the nature of the world. And that, as I see it, is kind of the point of science. Right? Right? That is the point of science. The pursuit of the truth, whether you like it or not." Let's see. Several articles dissect ideologically motivated retractions and self-retractions. These include the odious example. These are among the odious examples. There are many in here. The late Thomas Hoodlicky's work also. It was a horrific retraction. Done, again, off of ideology. More examples of ideologically motivated suppression of facts from the field of biology are discussed by Jerry Coyne and Luana Maroja. Yeah, there's a crap ton of good stuff in here, and I suggest you go read it. But I'm going to finish up with the conclusions here, and I will leave this, of course, all for you in this description, linked in the description, and I hope you go take a good look. Clark et al. Conclude, quote, "We have more questions than we have answers. Although many members of our research team are concerned about growing censoriousness in science, there is great diversity of opinion among us about whether and where scholars should draw the line on inquiry. We all agree, however, that the scientific community would be better situated to resolve these debates if, instead of arguing in circles based on conflicting intuitions, we spent our time collecting relevant data. It is possible that there are some instances in which censoring science promotes the greater good, but we cannot know that until we have better science on scientific censorship. We too hope that the subject of censorship will receive scientific attention it deserves. The scientific attention it deserves, excuse me. We hope that future studies will shed light on the harms of censorship and that a deeper understanding of how censorship operates will help to restore freedom of inquiry in science." We began our introduction to this virtual collection with the words of Marie Curie. We conclude with the words of Plato. "We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light." So, that is the bit. I encourage you to go read it because I think it is actually quite fabulous. Here's my concluding thoughts on this is that this kind of compendium needed to be created. So first off, thank you. I appreciate it. Just as to have handy, and it is an excellent compendium, not just of articles and institutions and things where this has happened, but also the thinking around it. At least from that particular issue. I think like there's a couple of articles in here that I might point to that, while they don't explicitly mention the issue of scientific censorship, would probably lean toward the thing of, well, it's not really happening. Well, it's about the communication. It's not about cancel culture. It's about consequences culture, that kind of garbage, which just represents a different perspective on the whole entire issue, which I didn't see represented here. So actually, give me half a hot second here. This is actually what I wanted to go find here, because I suspect that this particular author, John Herbert, would very much not agree with the commentary here, and has a long piece about it, and in all of this. And I don't know that I would necessarily. I very much do not agree with Mr. Herbert at all, but just to make the point that he would very much represent a completely different viewpoint on the issue to the authors. The other one that I'm sure the authors are familiar with would be this one, which John Herbert led, which Gina and I also reviewed on Rogue Journal Club when it first came out. This one I haven't even touched, because actually I read it all the way through, and it was so badly written that I did not know a good place to start reviewing it, to be honest. When I was trying to put together an article, it was very badly written. I will link it for you, but you obviously can make your own judgments on that. I was unsure. Maybe I'll do this for like a locals exclusive or something like that here at some point, but this is pretty terrible. But just to make the point that these are things that can be added with respect to this particular article, because while they do not come out specifically and say it here, it is very much related with respect to what the authors are talking about here. So this is a video that has gone on long enough. Go read the compendium and let me know what you think. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrian. May you stay curious.